Well, welcome back to the fifth episode of the first season of Krisullis for the Creative. Today, I have the pleasure of, we're all founding members, but having one of the early founding members of Krisullis on here, Alnoor. Very, very appreciative and grateful for you coming on here. So, first of all, we've spoke before, but our listeners haven't heard you or doesn't know of you. So, why don't you just give us a quick run through who is Alnoor?
All right. Thank you so much, Mads. It's super exciting to be here, share my story, and share my why for Krisullis. And to share that, I would like to say that, my journey started in Kenya, East Africa, where I was born. I've been through lots of, different situations, scenarios, and that shaped me to be who I am today. After immigrating to Canada, I'd gone to China to teach, and I thought I was going there to teach, but I went to learn. And that is the huge thing, is that so many times we go into situations where we think we know it all, but do we really? So when we get to the adjacent realities, that's where we can find out there is all another universe right there. And the thing about this is that when we keep an open door, not only an open door to the heart, an open door to the mind, an open hands and all of that, we're able to get so much more rather than doing it that, I know it all. So that was the reason for me to share about my trip to China. And when I went there to teach, I actually went there to learn. While there, I was approached by several of the leaders to teach them about careers and immigrating to Canada or North America and even Europe. And the thing about this is that there are different standards everywhere. So my passion is to mentor, to help, to open up doors and resources for people all over the world. I have a background. My education is in human resources and industrial relations. I am a career strategist. I'm also a keynote speaker. And my passions then moved into mental health. So many times people say, oh, yes, I'm doing fine. And we are not removing that mask. I have danced with mental health. And the thing about this is that we shove this under the rug. Now, look at this with what has happened with COVID. We're right now in an echo pandemic, especially here in Canada, where not only do we have the Omicron variant, but also the mental health tsunami. So we all walking each other home. And that is the reason I started out with open hearts, open minds, and open hands. And the thing about this is that even though I have taught mental health classes, cognitive behavior, 8-week-long series where I got trained with the Canadian Mental Health Association in BC, I also became the national manager for the cognitive behavior therapy program. It doesn't mean that since I have the tools, I do not dance with mental health or mental illness issues. The thing is that we all are walking each other home. And those who are now entering the job market or who have been furloughed and laid off, think about what kind of things are going on in their heads. Is that what happened before COVID? So we can say BC before COVID no longer applies. DC during COVID or AC after COVID. And for that, when we pivot and have an open mind and know that the adjacent realities is where that information is. So that's my reason for Krisullis to be a mentor, to be a leader in saying, I do not know everything. I know nothing. And that we are okay in not knowing, everything, because that's the way we will grow and learn. So thank you, Matt, for this opportunity for me to share my why.
Well, first of all, wow. And second of all, for the people that have listened to the first couple of episodes, know that you have just ruined my entire structure by answering half of the questions that I normally ask a little bit later on. One thing, though, that really stood out to me is how many of people in Krisullis is like have been involved in Africa or are from Africa. That's actually very surprising to me. Now a lot more of other things that we've spoken about starts making sense. One thing I wanted to ask about is because it really spoke to me when you said you went to China to teach, but you ended up being a student. First of all, I love that whole part of you learning through teaching. So I would really like to hear like some more details, maybe the best lessons or the most profound lessons you had down there or over there, depending on where you are in the world.
In Canada, Calgary, where it is super cold, and sometimes I miss my Africa heat hot because I came from near the equator. So you can just imagine, right? So let me give you an example, is that there are so many biases in the world, and we cannot change people. We can only change ourselves. And through my podcasts, through my webinars, people feel inspired. So when I went there, initially, there were 12 foreigners in the little town I was in. It was a city. But at that time, 1.5 million people lived in that tiny city. And that's a lot of people. And so where I'm going with that, it was a culture shock. And when I went out, I remember I don't eat meat. And so I'd gone to a tiny village, and everywhere was meat, meat, meat. And I went and stopped at a street side vendor to buy a roasted potato. Shortly, there were people forming around me. And the two other foreigners I was with, two other Canadians, they were ladies. One was a tall lady and one was extremely short. They were like, we're out of here. And because people were milling around. Now, the reason for that is that they see these people when they are not at all used to seeing foreigners. And there were three of us there. And the thing about this is that when I used to even travel on the buses, they would be sitting next to me. Many Chinese do not have body hair. And during the summer, I'd be wearing short sleeve shirts, and they'd be petting my hand, pretending they were not. So that is one thing. Yes, meds. And so when we look at these type of situations, it's curiosity. And when you go in with that fear, like, oh my God, they're invading my personal space, then you close off. So that was my first thing of opening up my horizons. The next thing is that they did not believe I was Canadian. Even though I'd been in Canada for a few years already, their idea of Canadians was blonde and blue eyes. And here I was, not at all fitting that mold. I remember going into the taxi cabs and they'd be like, "Ni Serena, are you a Russian?" I did not know. And I know what "ni" and "ma" is a question mark. Later on, I found out, and I would say, "不, 我是加拿大人." They'll be like, "你加拿大人啊?" I'll be like, "Yeah." So I have a colloquial Northeastern Chinese accent because I used to live there. And that was one thing about opening up and sharing who I was and letting people's barriers down, that Canada is a melting pot of cultures. The next thing, because they knew I was an HR major, they started getting me to recruit. And there was a dire need to get somebody really fast. The gentleman I brought on from Kenya as well, African, dark-skinned, and the dean of the school said, no. I said, why not? He said, well, he's just no. And right away, I was able to piece out that there was reservations and there's racism there. And we were in dire needs because the students were in class. I called my friend Sam and I said, Sam, are you able to come on over and do a quick class? Sorry, I cannot pay you because I've not yet hired you for this for the school. And he said, Alnoor, I'll do you a favor. He came The students loved him. The parents were like, what's going on over here? And the children kept on telling the parents, Mama, Baba, 他是好的经理，他是好的. You know, the teacher, 老师. Sorry, I said manager, 经理 is manager. And
you can say what you can say anything. I'm just gonna believe it. I am not understanding
no,
a single word of that.
Yeah, people may be listening and their Mandarin is, Mandarin speaking. So I better make sure I'm saying the right word. So
that's true.
yeah, 他非常好老师. He's a very good teacher. And they started asking me questions. I said, yes, I just brought him in because, the students were here and I needed the class to go on. And that is how I was able to change the perception, is that not by forcing, it's by, having it as a authentic, open, and really letting that speak for itself, that this is an excellent teacher, and to give him a chance. So the director of the school said, okay, I will hire him for 1 month. 3 years later, he was still there. So what did I learn? Is that when we try and push our knowledge, when it's not being accepted, there will be no change happening. That was one of my first learnings. My second learning is failure is not fatal. Did I mess up when I was there? Yes, because the culture is totally different. And for me, coming in, I was used to, I'd moved away from Kenya, I'd embraced the Canadian culture, and with the Canadian culture, there's policies and procedures and all of that, and nothing like that works. So for me to understand that, yes, you know what, you come in with these ideas, but this is a different land. When in Rome, do as the Romans is, a cliche thing, but it's so true. We're moving into Web3, where it's going to be a whole different ballgame. And when we go in with an open mind, an open heart, and open hands, holding each other, that yes, we are in this journey, that's where we'll be able to create momentum. My physiotherapist asked me, what are you feeling? So I said, I'm feeling like molasses. She goes, that's not a feeling. I said, what about molasses in January in Canada? When the maple syrup comes out of the trees, it freezes and trickles out of those maple trees. For me, I was feeling my change is going very slow. There's lots of changes that are going. So perhaps that feeling is appreciation, anxiousness, fear, and all of that is manifesting in a little bit of anxiety, because we're moving in a place where there's so many changes. So that was a long-winded story, but I wanted to give you a little bits of examples as to where I was coming from.
I think there were a bunch of good examples in that story. I can't tell you about all of them. As I said, I didn't quite get some of them. I definitely don't speak Mandarin. One thing, what was it? You said the first lesson. Could you just repeat it for me, just so I make sure I get it right?
Sure. The first lesson is that I believe I said failure is not fatal, or, change. And it's being open to change, being open to different possibilities, being open to learning, and being open to say, I do not know it all.
Now, actually, you saying that was what went into my mind. I needed that little last bit. It's one of the most dangerous sentences to say in this world is, I already know that. well, have you read it? Have you watched the video? Have you listened to the podcast? I hadn't listened to the whole thing. Well, then you technically don't know if you already know it.
So true.
So, like, unless it's something you already know how to implement, and it's not something you just, it's something like in a book, you're forced to read, and you're like, I read this 1,000 times in other books, and you're forced to it. You can skip it. But we need to be aware of, we might not know what's there. There might be something new, there might be a new perspective, a different outlook to things, and that might be what you need to, or for it to really click. And you don't know until you read it, done it before. And it's also very dangerous when you get asked by a new boss or a manager, do you know how to do this? And you just say yes. That's something I would do. I'm normally able to talk my way out of it. But if you say yes and then you do something, screw it up, or you should have said you didn't know. When you knew, it's okay to say, well, I don't know, or for you to be shown it. I always see to the new people that started our place. And I do it more and more and making, like, I wouldn't even say push, but really explain why I would really like all their questions, even if it's something so simple as a why, or why, like, how come do we do this there? Why do we do it this way? That I would be more than willing to like elaborate on that. I think one of the most like wrong things you can do in the start of a job, and I know you do a bunch of stuff with people, helping them into careers. So if you can take it from after I finish this, I think would be great, is to not ask enough questions. Like, that's the most dangerous thing to do in a new job. It's like not ask enough questions. You should be asking a whole bunch of questions when you're new.
Exactly. I love that. And the thing is that with everything that's going on, there's so many unknowns, is that when people are not confident in themselves, and I would be the first one to let you know that on my LinkedIn profile, I put myself as a relentless architect of possibility with others. Yet, at times, I struggle with my self-worth. It's because of the stories that have happened in the past and the stories I'm telling myself. And I recognize this. And so when you come in with fear and you're asking those questions, and the person you're asking those questions is also based in fear because there are so many unknowns these days, that's where the communication breakups happen. And so where I go with this is that asking questions is a good thing, and holding space for the person you're asking those questions to. It's because we are all moving in so many different directions that when we respond, we may be defensive. We may be short because of things that are going on in our heads, maybe things that are going on with our children or with our external family members and all of that. So I think that holding space is crucial in today's day and age, is that when you're asking questions, give yourself space. Give the person you're asking those questions to space, because I think that's where lots of conflicts happen.
Well, as you probably have noticed if you're watching this in video form, we have had some technical issues. The connection kind of went, which is why Alnoor has all of a sudden got a very, very nice new background. Just to pick it up from where we left, there was one thing that really stood out to me on your LinkedIn profile. A question I just wanted to ask just before before the connection went. You mentioned on your LinkedIn profile, this line says, I bring light to professional development. I'd really like to know what you mean by saying that.
Thank you. That's a great question, Mads, and I'll comment on the background in a little while. So where I'm going with this is that I started off working in human resources, and then I moved into becoming a career strategist, and I got trained in mental health. With what is going on, whether they're a new job seeker, whether they're in career transition, or they're in their third quarter. That means those individuals that are already retired but are coming back to work. There's so many changes that have gone through that I bring light. And the meaning of that is my name, Alnoor, means the light in Arabic. And so that's why I use the hashtag I am Alnoor. And so I help individuals in all stages of the career. It does not mean that they are in job search, whether they're employed and would like to get higher up into the firm. What are some of the things I can do to help them either in the career or in the mental health space? Because those are the areas that I am been trained in.
Kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel in some sort of way.
Well, I would not like to put it at the end of the tunnel, maybe at the beginning of the tunnel. Let's read that. Because
well, I hope there's light at the beginning of the tunnel as well. Actually, it's kind of weird if there's only in one end.
Yeah. And so, you know, we all go through journeys, right? And so
for sure,
at the back over here, what it is that this was the first mountain I had successfully summited. Now, I used to be over 385 pounds. Back in 2009, that was what my weight was. I have now lost over 220 pounds, and I'm at 165 pounds. And so it's like what I'd mentioned earlier is failure is not fatal. In your career, professional journeys is bound to be failure. And we're so many times get stuck in the narrative that I failed. And did I fail when I was losing my weight? Many times. And when we look at it and say, what can I learn from it? That's when we can move forward. So this was that first mountain I climbed. I climbed that again. Did I want to quit? Yes. Did I feel I could not go on? Yes. But what we do is we have a tribe that's going to pull us up when we're falling down. That's going to say, keep on going. You got this. And one of my hashtags is micro steps to massive impact. When things come to us, we can get overwhelmed. But when we chunk and break it down, with the weight loss journey, I had to chunk things down. With the career journeys, with the professional journeys, we chunk things down. We break it into smaller steps. And I love this African proverb, is that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And that's what I love about the Krisullis community, is that we will be together, journeying along, and we will go far.
Yeah, but it also do make a lot of sense. The whole thing about if you really want to go far, you should go alone, kind of like the short term. If something is for the short term, it just needs to get done fast. It's definitely a lot quicker doing it yourself. But also, as you mentioned with the whole thing about going up the mountain, wanting to quit, it's a lot easier to quit when you're going alone, no matter how fast you're going. Like if you want to go on a long journey, climb Everest, for example, I don't think it would be very wise to do it alone, because you might go up like the first couple of peaks or the first couple of stages fast, but if something goes wrong, you're not going to go far.
Exactly. Like people get to Everest Base Camp, but that is a huge feat. So I remember when I was over in 2009, my friend Shabu had returned from summiting Mount Kilimanjaro. Now that guy is my hero. The reason is that this gentleman mountain bikes, he cooks, he bakes, he line dances, all of that. And he climbs mountains and he is legally blind. And I said, Shabu, how?
How?
And he said, I believe I can. What I'll do is I'll send you the link to the post I created on my Fridays, about people that inspire me.
Please do.
I will. And this gentleman, I've hiked mountains with him. Amazing feeling is that he uses his other senses. He goes together with his wife, and his wife, he holds her shoulder, he's climbing these rocks, and I'm just like, and the thing that really stuck was, I believe I can. I believe I can. And when we're going alone, is what you said, and climbing Everest or whichever mountains that are in our lives, we can quit easily. Our failures will feel like they're fatal. But when we're with the tribe, that's how we can move forward. So I started to be present, be mindful, be me. And I waver in that. Believe, live. I've broken that word into making it sound which is best part of it. And when we live, we truly live, we can do so much more. We get stuck in our narratives. We get stuck in our stories. And I too get that way many times.
I think we all do. But what you mentioned, like it's about being in the present, which doesn't really lead very well up to my next question, because I'm very curious as I get all the Krisullis members on here. Where do you see Krisullis in 3 years?
I love that question. And as HR major and with the interview questions, where do you see yourself in 3 years? I started to, when I was delivering at conferences, I told the HR managers there that is the worst question you can ask. The reason being, 3 years ago, we didn't know that we'd be in this kind of situation. What COVID has done, it has brought people together in virtual settings. And there's so much that has changed. However, I like to dream. Actually, I've got this beautiful script word and it says dream right next to my door to go outside. So when I turn off the lights, I see that. Is that when we dream and when we have those big, audacious, hairy goals, bog goals, is that's when we can say, okay. And when we dream, we need to put that plan in action. So to go back to your question, where do I see in 3 years? I see that we have really grown our community. We have started in one continent, but we are expanding to different continents. People are seeing and believing in the vision, in the mission, in that social reciprocity is the way forward. And those are my big dreams for Krisullis. And that's where I'd like to see, is that our community is growing exponentially. That yes, we can, is that motto. And that yes, we will hold your hand. We'll hold your hand with open hands, with open minds, and with open hearts. Because when we open our hands, we're holding space. For that, we need to open our minds. And to open our minds, we need to open our hearts. That is one of the biggest things that I'm working on within the smaller circle that I have and expanding it to the bigger circles.
That was very heartfelt. One thing I want to mention here, because you also talked about dreams, and one thing that I've found in common with my dreams is when you think of how I'd like to do something, you might not know how to get there. The most crucial thing you can do at that stage is to hold on to the dream at least, because then you're gonna find a way. The way is gonna develop. It's kind of as like a magical hidden path. If you keep focusing on it, it's slowly gonna show how you're gonna get towards that, go towards that.
I wasn't quite sure if I understood your question. Would you mind repeating it?
Well, it wasn't really a question, it was more of a statement.
Statement, okay.
Because one thing, I just wanted to leave it with that. And also, just before we end here, is there anything you would like to leave our listeners with, just as a final golden nugget?
Thank you so much, Mads. That I think is such an important and a lovely question, is that so many times we focus on the fear, the future. And when we truly stop and listen, in that listening, the answers are all inside. Yet we go outside to seek for these answers. One of the big things is that in my mental health journey, as I talk about these mountains and summiting mountains, is that when you get to the top of the mountain, it expands your view into the valley and you can see, oh, wait, there's another mountain. So always be open to that learning and be open to receive the help. It's okay if you do not know the answers. It's okay to feel afraid, but reach out. And if that help is not available there, there's somebody else who's willing to give you that hand, to pull you up and let you know, believe, be, live. Thank you, Max.
Beautiful message. Well, with that being said, where, if people, you really touch them in this podcast, where can they find you?
I love LinkedIn, as you know very well.
I know.
I'm also on YouTube. If you do search up I Am Alnoor, IAMALNOOR, you'll find me on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, Telegram, Discord. I just got on another Upstream, I think it is. So I'm everywhere, but on LinkedIn, you'll be able to only follow me. You have to do your research to know how to connect. I'll leave you with.
Well, I'm not going to tell them anything, I promise. All I'm going to do is I'm going to be nice to leave all the links you mentioned. I still don't know, like, that's the thing about this Krisullis podcast. I don't know when I say links in the follow button. I don't know where it is yet. So I'm just pointing everywhere. It's somewhere around here. Everything is going to be. Do click the follow button. Do follow the links. And again, thank you very much for coming on. It was a real pleasure having you on.
Mad love.